Hello everyone, and welcome to a different type of video, where today I am asking, is Super Smash Bros. A crossover? Now I know what you're thinking, of course it's a crossover, that's like 80% of its selling point. But is it though? Well, first of all, what is a crossover just in general? Is it just whenever two series interact? Well, I would argue that it's not, and to explain this, let's hop into a hypothetical. Let's start off by talking about Mario and Luigi. Obviously, they're both from the same series, the Mario series, and as such, when Luigi appears in Mario games, it's not called a Mario and Luigi crossover event, because they're from the same series, it wouldn't make sense. Similarly, if we go ahead and talk about when Diddy Kong was in Mario Kart Wii, that wasn't a Mario and Diddy Kong crossover event, because again, Diddy Kong is just another Mario character, and as such, him appearing in a Mario game is just perfectly natural, and as such, it's not a crossover. But then we move on to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which features Link. Now Link is a Zelda character, and as such, this is a crossover, because it's two different series interacting. But by that account, Mario Kart Wii actually was a crossover, because no, Diddy Kong is not a Mario character. I lied to you. He's a Donkey Kong Country character, which is something completely different. But I know what you're thinking. Well, Diddy Kong has appeared in a lot of Mario games, and as such, he's built history, so he is a Mario character. But that's some garbage. Who gets to blow the whistle on, yep, you are officially a part of this franchise because you've appeared this much? In my opinion, if you can argue that Mario Kart Wii is not a crossover because Diddy Kong and Mario share a lot of history together, I believe that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is also not a crossover because, well, Mario and Link share a lot of history together. I mean, take for instance Link appearing in Super Mario RPG, or Mario's face appearing as one of the masks in Majora's Mask. Needless to say, these guys have a lot of history together, so what's to stop them from being in the same universe? And in fact, how many references are needed for something to be considered as in the same universe? Well, normally I would say that that's quite a lot. They need a lot of history to be in the same universe. But for today's argument, I'm going to be bumping that requirement down to 1. As today, I'm going to be trying to find one canonical reference between all the characters in Smash Bros. To prove that they're all in the same universe, to finally prove that the game is not a crossover. Well, that's what I would say, but I'm not alone. And with that, I want to introduce the man of lost and obscure bits himself, Tetrabit Gaming. But with that, we have 82 characters to get through, so let's hop into this.
Now, who to start with is an interesting question. While Kirby is an obvious choice, considering his close ties to Smash, Mario is a much better pick as he seems to be more in the center of all the references. So for the sake of simplicity, we'll start with him. As for Mario's series, the vast majority of Mario characters are obviously a part of it, and this includes all of these guys. One character, however, is kind of tricky though, that being Dr. Mario, as no game actually portrays him with non-Doctor characters. That is, of course, except for Dr. Mario 64, which actually has you going up against a completely normal Wario, because Wario is the definition of hygiene. Alternatively, you could also use the viruses that appear not only in Dr. Mario, but also in Mario and Luigi Dream Team. Either way, Dr. Mario is definitely connected.
While we're here, I guess we should also talk about the inhabitants of DK Isle. Now obviously Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong interact quite a bit with Mario in the sports titles, but King K. Rool also appears. However, he is a little more obscure, but he does appear in games like Super Mario Super Sluggers.
The Legend of Zelda series is up next as our first real series, and it features the problem of multiple timelines, as we can't say that all three main timelines of The Legend of Zelda exist in the same universe. But that won't stop us from trying, so let's start off with the main version of Link, the one that's from Twilight Princess and the Breath of the Wild. The solution to this link is the easiest, as both versions appear in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, because Ocarina of Time appears in the same timeline and art style as Twilight Princess, we can assume that they exist in the same universe, and by association, so do the three characters from Ocarina of Time. Now, the same can't be said about Toon Link though, who can only be found interacting with the normal Zelda cast in Hyrule Warriors. And speaking of Zelda, she is a tricky one here, as she isn't the Zelda from Breath of the Wild, but instead the one from A Link Between Worlds. That doesn't mean there isn't a reference though, as by using the Majora's Mask in Link's house in the same game, we can confirm that young Link and the Link Between Worlds universe are connected. Perhaps you could say, by a link between worlds.
Let's talk about an easy but really useful one next, that being Kirby. Now, in order to prove that the Kirby crew all exist alongside Mario, all we have to do is look at Kirby Superstar, which features a fight against Dedede with some familiar faces in the crowd. Now, free characters may seem good on their own, but the real reason Kirby is great is because in Kirby Superstar Ultra in the Great Cave Offensive, there are several references that can be found in the Treasure Hoard. Now, some of these references aren't too useful as they connect series we already know about, like the Bucket and Shell for Mario, the DK Barrel for You'll Never Guess Who, and the Triforce for The Legend of Zelda. However, a lot of the references are actually quite helpful, such as the Mr. Saturn, which connects the Earthbound series, as well as the Metroid series, which not only features the Screw Attack in the Treasure Hoard, but Samus actually makes a guest appearance in Kirby's Adventure. Obviously, in Metroid proper, every version of Samus is related, and Ridley's relation, well, it's quite apparent.
One last reference that appears in the Treasure Hoard is Captain Falcon's helmet, but if you're looking for a real obscure reference to F-Zero and Captain Falcon, look no further than Super Mario RPG, which features the Blue Falcon in this hidden area. And also in this area is another helpful reference, that being an Arwing, which connects us to the Star Fox cast.
Now let's talk about Pokemon, a series that is definitely represented in Smash, but not easy to place a reference on. But there are two ways to go about this though. The first is through consoles, as Nintendo Switches appear in a few of the recent Pokemon games, as well as in New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. But if you wanted to go old school, you could instead. And you can do this by connecting Mario to Paper Mario through Mario & Luigi Paper Jam, and then use consoles like the GameCube that can be found in Fort Francis's Castle and Super Paper Mario to connect the universes from older Pokemon games like Pokemon Ruby. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't the perfect reference, simply because the GameCube is a real-world object. It is something that exists in reality, and if I could just use real-world objects, well, that invalidates pretty much all of the difficulty of the challenge, because then I could say, well, Mario and Castlevania, they both exist in the same universe because both of them have grass in them. And let's be honest, that would be really lame. As such, I'm avoiding any sort of real-world connections. However, I am going to be still allowing any sort of Nintendo consoles for two reasons. One, they are Nintendo things. And two, Rob, he's a real-world thing that is also a video game character. It's kinda hard to dismiss that. But with that, if you think this feels cheap, there is another reference to use, that being a Mario costume that appears in Pokemon Sun and Moon. So that's always a second option. Either way, this connects all of the Pokemon characters, and we can move on.
And speaking of the GameCube, another game comes to mind, that being in Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, a GameCube does appear, which connects Snake. I guess if we are gonna go down this rabbit hole, we shouldn't stop here, as we can actually connect Snake to Simon through Super Bomberman R, as both characters are playable. And with Simon in, Richter obviously follows. The best part though is one character actually ties everything back to the beginning, as Wario Blast for the Game Boy features Bomberman, meaning the GameCube is not needed as a reference if you don't think it should count.
I guess now is as good of a time as any to start another tangent, this one being the most important tangent as it should lead to Fire Emblem, one of the most excessively populated series in Smash. We can start off with Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube, which not only features the Tekken character Heihachi Mishima from the same series as Kazuya, but also features Link from The Legend of Zelda. This connects us to a crucial game for this challenge, that being Project X Zone 2, which features several characters including Kazuya. But more importantly, two of these characters are Chrom and Lucina, which connects the rest of the Fire Emblem franchise.
That's not all though, as Fiora from the Xenoblade Chronicles series also appears, which connects Shulk. While there is an argument to be made that this shouldn't connect Pyra and Mythra, as Xenoblade 1 and 2 are different retellings of the same story, because the Monado exists in both games, I think it is safe to say that the two universes are connected, at least in some capacity. And if you do disagree, there is always another reference to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 that we can use, that being the Rex costume that appears in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. On a separate note, Mega Man can also be derived from Project X Zone 2, as both X and Zero appear here, as well as Street Fighter's Ryu and Ken.
That basically wraps up Project X Zone 2 though, so let's move on to some series that have less representation in Smash. We can start off with the Ice Climbers and the Duck Hunt duo, as both actually appear in the same game as a few other Nintendo characters. The game being Tetris. No, not the 99 one, but Tetris DS. In this game, while you're playing Tetris on the bottom screen, various Nintendo games are being played on the top screen. However, if the game just used a bunch of unconnected games, I wouldn't think of it as a valid reference because you don't actually see the game elements interacting, similar to why I haven't been using 9Volt's treasure trove of micro games from WarioWare. However, the real connection comes after the game. That being in the credits, you can actually see all the characters falling down together, which gets the green light from me.
Now hold on, you can't just talk about Tetris references without talking about the original NES version. After beating the game, you would get a cutscene featuring a bunch of Nintendo characters, including Mario, Samus, Link, and Pit, who connects the Kid Icarus series. Another old reference also comes with Mr. Game & Watch, and it's not just the shopkeeper from the great achievement known as Wario Land 4. Instead, I'm talking about Game & Watch Gallery 4, which has Mario stand face to face with Mr. Game & Watch in some cutscenes.
Have we mentioned Sonic yet? I honestly should have just lumped him in with the Mario characters considering how many times they've met at the Olympics. Either way, he's definitely in the same universe considering the half a dozen times they've met. I would also like to mention Bayonetta here, as Bayonetta 2 features several Nintendo costumes, as well as Mario coins and an equipable Chain Chomp. Another easy reference is the one to Pikmin and Captain Olimar, as in Pikmin 2 you can find Peach's crown in the snow in the Valley of Repose. And one last easy one is Little Mac, who not only has Mario appear as a referee in Punch-Out for the NES, but literally fights Donkey Kong fist to fist in Super Punch-Out for the Wii.
Alright, I feel like now's a good time to talk about all of the Mario Kart characters. At the beginning, we have talked about Link, but there are actually quite a few of them. In Mario Kart DS, for instance, Rob the Robot is a playable character. In the arcade Mario Karts, you can actually play as Pac-Man, and in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you can play as Villager, Isabelle, and the Inklings. Another character, or group of characters, that are playable in a couple of Mario Karts are the Miis, which cover all of their variations too. The Miis also provide a useful connection themselves through Wii Fit and the Wii Fit Trainer.
For our last non-DLC character, we have to get to Cloud, who is a couple of steps away. The first step is to go to Fortune Street, a simple game known about its line about Yoshi committing tax fraud. However, you might not know that the game is actually a collab between Mario and Dragon Quest, which also connects Hero. Dragon Quest is surprisingly the key to getting the Final Fantasy, as the two series had their own collab in Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and Itadaki Street Special, which features slimes and chocobos alike, as well as Cloud and Sephiroth. I guess now would also be a good time to mention that Sora fights Sephiroth in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, so he can be thrown in here too.
And with that, we are at the home stretch with only some of the DLC characters remaining. To start things off, we have Joker, who actually was kind of tricky to pin down, as references to Persona seem few and far between. That doesn't mean there aren't any though, as Dragalia Lost actually features both Fire Emblem characters and Persona characters alike. On the flip side, Banjo and Kazooie are a little easier to track down, as Banjo appears front and center in Diddy Kong Racing.
Terry is next, and he's also pretty simple, as in Capcom vs SNK, he fittingly appears alongside Ryu. This leaves Steve as the last easy reference, as both Mario items and Minecraft blocks appear in the Henry Stickmin collection, which is official in my eyes, as Nintendo realized the studio that developed it by putting a little old Among Us on the Switch.
So, is that it? Are all the characters accounted for?
I hate to say it, but there is one character I skipped, simply due to how unconnected they are. That character is none other than Min Min.
Really? Her? After everything, a Nintendo character is what kills the run?
For the longest time, I would have to say yes. I mean, you would expect some references considering that this is essentially Punch-Out Switch Edition, maybe with Little Mac appearing as a fighter or as an audience member, or at least cameo as something as insignificant as his gloves appearing or something like that. But there's nothing. I couldn't even really use real-world objects like boxing gloves or drones because everything here is uniquely designed and covered in branding in the ARMS language, disconnecting everything from the real world or any other game. I'll be honest, this character broke me. It got me to a point where I was considering the dress Ribbon Girl wears in one of the gallery photos to be close enough to Peach's dress from Mario 64, or to use the Santa costume as a reference because Santa's technically a fictional character and both Ribbon Girl and Mario can be seen wearing Santa costumes. I mean, I was grasping at straws, and even that's an understatement on how desperate I was. And I was going to consider this a failure at the end of the day. Well, at least until I found it. In the badge menu, there are a couple of badges with Joy-Cons on them. But these are of course just UI, which invalidates them being useful. Or at least that's what I would have said, if you can't actually see Springman literally showing one off in some of the gallery artwork.
Alright, I guess that's everyone, meaning it is indeed possible to connect the Smash roster only using references from other games.
So is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate a crossover? No, it's not. Well, as long as you only require one reference for something to be in the same universe. Because if you only require one reference, well, every single character in the game can be found to be connected to one another. But before I end off the video, I want to give a huge thank you to Tetrabit Gaming. He has been incredibly supportive and incredibly patient with this video, as I've been working on it for the last 3 years, and it has been a really great experience to work with him. And I gotta say, if you haven't already, go ahead and check him out. He's a really cool dude who finds a lot of really cool and lost bits. And I really do appreciate everything he did for me. But with that, I want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.